Have you ever had an aha moment? I had one back in the middle of January where suddenly something clicked in my head. And it had to do with a presentation from Dr. Aaron Wilson, who is from Ohio State University, and he was talking about climate change. Now, I know we don't want to get into climate change in any great degree. You're all tired of hearing the media refer to every weather event that occurs as ultimately a severe event as a result of climate change. And we can't relate to that for one thing, because our only experiences with climate are weather. And this is what caused the aha moment in my case. So Aaron's talking about global temperature and global weather. And he asked this question to the group. He asked, how many of you were born after 1985? And of course, there's a significant number of certified crop advisors that fall into that demographic now. And so probably at least half of the room stuck their hand up, said, yeah, I was born after 1985. And he said to them, do you realize that you have never experienced a month where temperatures have been below average? And I'm sitting there, I'm one of the old guys, I'm saying, hold on, Aaron, that's a bunch of malarkey. Because I can remember, I was standing out in an alfalfa field, I remember this like it was yesterday, alfalfa field in the middle of June, just outside St. Mary's. I had my winter coat on, the customer had his long insulated coveralls on, and we're standing there looking at this alfalfa field that doesn't want to grow. Obviously just because it was too cold. So I'm thinking, Aaron, I've experienced that month of below average temperature, so I don't believe you. But then the aha moment was I suddenly clued in that, well, he's not talking in that particular case, in that instant, he's not talking about the climate in southern Ontario. He's talking about global average temperatures. And I don't think there's any doubt the global averages are creeping upwards. I mean, and that's trouble. If you live in a low latitude part of the globe, you don't want, the last thing you need is more heat. But the purpose of Aaron's presentation, and it also dovetailed quite easily with a presentation earlier in the month by Jeff Schuessler at the Southwest Ag Conference in Ridgetown. Both presentations were talking about the effect, how climate is changing, but more importantly, what the effect is for crop producers and in the northern Corn Belt. These latitudes that are the same as we have here in southern Ontario. And there are certain facts, both of them refer to the same thing, and I don't think these facts are in dispute whatsoever. Fact number one, our carbon dioxide levels are increasing. They both showed a chart that shows the same thing. Fact number two, our growing seasons are getting longer. It's estimated that since the 80s, our average growing season has accumulated an additional 7-8 days here today. Aaron Wilson referred to the fact that here in southern Ontario, we're starting to experience a climate that's more like Ohio, more like the Ohio climate was 20 and 30 years ago. So our growing seasons are getting longer. The little longer growing season does reflect the fact that our average temperatures are slightly getting warmer. But it gets very interesting. During the summer, during the growing season, in fact, our daytime hives are not increasing. They are indeed flatlining. The difference in the growing season is the fact that our nighttime lows are not as low as they used to be. You're getting a little bit of a boost in nighttime temperature. So for our major field crops, that net stress is simply less. So we back up. We take increased carbon dioxide levels, little bit fuller growing season, a little longer growing season, due to the fact that our temperatures are slightly higher, but not radically different. And certainly to the point where any surplus extra heat's not being experienced at the top, it's just giving a little boost at the bottom. The net result of all these things means that the growing environment for our crops is more favorable. And we're seeing that. Obviously, our trend lines, yield trend lines on all crops are increasing. The great thing, it becomes a self-replicating cycle in a sense, because the interesting fact about high-yielding crops is that they pump more water into the atmosphere. As long as moisture is available in the soil, a bigger yielding crop will take that moisture and pump a certain amount of it back into the air. That extra moisture flying into the air mass has a cooling effect. Makes sense. That partially explains why our daytime highs are not increasing. The other thing that extra moisture going into the atmosphere directly causes are things that you and I can relate to during the growing season, the middle of the summer. The fact that the neighbor 2 rows over gets a nice inch shower during the middle of the day, you get a few drops on your windshield at home. 2 days later, the neighbor to the west gets a little bit of a shower, nice 3/4 inch, inch and a half. You get another few drops of rain. Maybe a little bit further away, they get a downpour of 3 inches. And you think, ooh, that's almost too much. But the reason why that is happening is directly related to the same causes of those higher yields, flatlining temperatures. And it's partially this increased moisture level. Hot, humid air still can only hold so much moisture. And when it hits that cool air above, you get the mixing of hot, humid air rapidly rising, hitting the cold air, turns around, descends, mixing with the cold air, condenses all that moisture, and you get those brief, vigorous, more severe, more intense rainfall events where you will get a dump in a localized area of 1 to 2 to 3 inches. And 5 miles that way, they ended up with diddly. Don't get any. So this idea of more intense rainfall as a result of, and more intense storms as a result of some climate change factors is indeed for us a real occurrence. It's a real event. Aaron Wilson showed at the Delhi Research Station in 2022 that it was only over 9 days in the calendar year, 9 days accounted for 22% of the total moisture accumulation for that entire year, for the full 365 days. To wrap this up and kind of put a bow around it, I want you to remember a couple of things, or at least take a couple of things from what we've talked about. The first thing, when you read articles or hear people talking about the effects of higher temperatures on food production around the world, and that doom and gloom wise, everything is going to be bad going forward. Keep in mind that what they are referring to for the most part are the low latitudes, the areas close to the equator, where heat is already a problem from a food production point of view. You put more heat on that, on top of that, excessive heat at some point, all field crops, no matter what you're talking about, rice, corn, beans, wheat, they do suffer when it gets too hot. That's a fact. For us, in the more mid to northern latitudes, we're not going to see as big a detrimental effect from the heat. Any excess heat or growth in the climate change probably is going to easily be adapted by breeding. Breeders are going to be able to keep up with that climate change reality. And our crops here are going to continue to produce pretty good yields, at least in the foreseeable future. The rubber really hits the road, however, when we consider that the disparity of food production, disparity between the haves, such as ourselves, the have-nots that are on the equator, is going to increase. And that will pose some, probably some significant problems going forward that the world has to sort out. Good countries, productive countries, are going to have to figure out how to help out their less than fortunate neighbors. Maybe take some of that population from less fortunate countries to the south and absorb that into our potentially more favorable weather regime. So there's some real global implications of this whole process. I don't have the answers to them, but hopefully I've given you a couple of things that you can consider. And the next time you hear somebody talking about global warming, talking about how average temperatures are increasing, you can relate back to the fact that, oh yeah, maybe they are. And the fact that I had a cold year several years ago, really the two of them are valid, but they're not really necessarily related.